Last night on my show, the usually sensible Labor MP Joel Fitzgibbon argued that while he didn't want to see people smuggling start up again, denying the Sri Lankan family who've been living in Biloela, now on Christmas Island, a right to stay in Australia, he said lacked compassion. Funny, that's how it all started with Kevin Rudd, getting the trade going up again after the Howard years, when he implied you could both control Australia's borders yet still be compassionate to illegal arrivals. Well, 50,000 illegal arrivals turned up on his watch and later that of Julia Gillard. Now, you can't be compassionate, Kevin, so-called compassionate, and hold the line on borders. And it's not right to try and paint this as an argument of compassion either on the left or cold-hardness or cruelty on the right. There's nothing compassionate about deaths at sea. There's nothing compassionate about lining the pockets of criminal gangs, plying the people smuggling trade that prey on the vulnerable. There's nothing compassionate about a limited amount of refugee resettlement places in this country going mainly to young men who can pay their way here from the Middle East and the Indian subcontinent, leaving women and vulnerable children for years and years in some of the world's most overcrowded, genuine refugee camps. And there's definitely nothing compassionate about expecting our Navy to retrieve corpses at sea. As with everything, there's a little bit of history in this issue, in the case of the Murugapians, that's not being told. Mum, Dad, and 2 little girls, and it's the history that's important. Mother and father arrived separately by a legal boat paying people smugglers during the Rudd-Gillard years to get to Australia. Once here, they sought refugee status, and pending the determination of their claims, as with others, they were put on bridging visas. Now, they met in Australia, they later married, and they had 2 little girls during this time. All the way through going back to their arrival in 2012, the family's claims to protection, their refugee claims, well, they've been comprehensively assessed on a number of occasions by the Department of Home Affairs and various merits review tribunals. And throughout this process, the family has been consistently found not to be owed protection, consistently found not to be refugees. As early as 2012, the father, Mr. Murugapian, was found not to be a refugee, and that decision was affirmed or upheld by the Refugee Review Tribunal. In 2016, his wife was also found not to be a refugee, with the Immigration Assessment Authority later affirming that decision in 2017. These decisions have also been subject to judicial review, including the Federal Magistrates Court, Federal Circuit Court, and via appeal to the full Federal Court, with applications for special leave to the High Court of Australia rejected. Each of these applications have been dismissed. Claims that the children born here in Australia are Australian citizens by virtue of the fact they were born here, well, that's not correct. Because under Australian law, children who are born in Australia to parents who are not Australian citizens take on the visa status of their parents. And this is a really important point. It's an important legal provision because it prevents non-citizens using children as a means to stay in this country. Now, despite losing every case and every appeal to remain in Australia and be granted asylum, this family is still refusing to accept the government's offer to return them to their homeland of Sri Lanka. And again, another important point that should not get lost. Not being held on Christmas Island against their will. At any time, they could elect to return to their homeland. At any time, they could join the some 6,500 illegal arrivals that have gone home, including over 1,500 Tamils like them back to Sri Lanka, given the civil war has now long ended. Instead, they have remained in detention by choice and with the support of activist lawyers and others that are now fighting via the children to remain in Australia. Now, am I sympathetic to a family that until now was living in Biloela in central Queensland and contributing to our society? Dad working in a local abattoir and mum volunteering at St Vincent de Paul. Yes, I am. And it'd be hard to find an Australian who isn't sympathetic. This isn't what this case is about. It isn't about an exception for the Murugappians. It's about allowing people who have tested our legal system all the way through and been found not to be refugees, somehow staying on by dint of media pressure, activist lawyers, a government like that perhaps of Rudd and Gillard bending. And rather than allowing an exception, as Joel Fitzgibbon tried to claim last night, we would in fact create a new precedent. A new precedent that if you wear down the system, you will win. A new precedent that if you keep up the pressure, you make it a big media circus, you'll stay. Of course, that's precisely what the people smugglers want and need to be able to open the trade up again. Look at Europe. Look at the Middle East. Look at North Africa. Look at the movement of people. Not here because of government resolve. This family, they would be the one example that the people smugglers need to trumpet far and wide to open up the trade. It's not talked about often, but many of the 50,000 illegal arrivals who came under Labor are still here, watching the outcome of this case and others like it. Now, I know people can't be left in limbo forever. We can't allow ourselves as a country to be bluffed into acquiescence or bullied into acquiescence by people whose determination is stronger than ours. And their backers have turned this into a public spectacle. As every traveller knows, Sri Lanka is not a bad place. The civil war's long over. Its prosperity and tourism trade, all of that's growing. And Sri Lanka's happy to welcome citizens back who were foolish enough to test Australia's resolve. The Murugappians should go home. It's as simple as that. And I'm sure the friends they've made in Biloela would be happy to help them while in Sri Lanka and perhaps even sponsor them to come the right way to Australia. Let's never forget, a country which stops the boats and keeps them stopped is not acting immorally. The very opposite is the case.